Hard knocks in the Granite State. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders taking their best shots at the Democratic debate in New Hampshire. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Welcome to our special coverage of tonight's face-off. If last night's town hall was a dress rehearsal, tonight's debate was the closing act before New Hampshire voters go to the polls on Tuesday. The candidates gave as good as they got.
I'm not making promises that I cannot keep.
Well, I haven't quite run for president before.
There is no disagreement between us on universal coverage for health care. The disagreement is, where do we start from and where do we end up? Senator Sanders wants us to start all over again.
The idea that I would dismantle health care in America while we're waiting to pass a Medicare for all is just not accurate. Secretary Clinton does represent the establishment.
I've got to just jump in here because, honestly, Senator Sanders is the only person who I think would characterize me, a woman running to be the first woman president, as exemplifying the establishment.
Being part of the establishment is in the last quarter having a super PAC that raised $15 million from Wall Street.
Well, I think it's time to end the very artful smear that you and your campaign have been carrying out in recent weeks. And let's talk about the issues.
If Hillary Clinton is going to take a bite out of Sanders' double-digit lead in New Hampshire, tonight was the best chance to try to do that. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry joins us now. And Ed, it got pretty heated. Your reaction?
It got a little hot, Shannon. You're right. I think it took 5 debates, but the gloves finally came off. There were sharp personal attacks, accusations of running each other down, slamming each other. Particularly Hillary Clinton upset that she's being accused of taking Wall Street money and then being in Wall Street's pocket. But I think there were also, beyond the personal attacks, real sharp exchanges on policy differences, healthcare, guns, Wall Street reform. And what we saw was a Hillary Clinton who was a bit feistier, a bit tougher, because her back's against the wall now. It's sort of a mixed bag for her in the sense that she's no longer sitting back on a big lead because that lead has evaporated. And right now, a new poll came out right before this debate showing that Hillary Clinton is trailing by 20 points here in New Hampshire ahead of Tuesday's primary, and also that Bernie Sanders is now inching ahead of her, raising more money than her in the month of January, $5 million more. And so she was feistier, and there was really a battle for sort of the soul of the Democratic Party between the liberal and moderate wings. Listen to this.
I am a progressive who gets things done, and the root of that word, progressive, is progress. If we're going to get into labels, I don't think it was particularly progressive to vote against the Brady bill 5 times. I don't think it was progressive to vote to give gun makers and sellers immunity. I don't think it was progressive to vote against Ted Kennedy's immigration reform.
Instead of arguing about definitions, let's talk about what we should do. And one of the things we should do is not only talk the talk, but walk the walk.
And so I talked about some of the strengths for Clinton, the strengths for Sanders. The issues they were fighting about were really his issues, Wall Street reform, the middle class, the ones that he's really spotlighted. So they were sort of playing and fighting it out on his turf. And so I think the very bottom line is that Bernie Sanders continues to sort of set the agenda here. But the question for him moving forward is he's got a big lead here in New Hampshire, as I noted. But beyond New Hampshire, can he win primaries? He came so close in Iowa, but fell short. He's setting the agenda. But is he going to start winning? Will he actually win, Shen?
Well, interestingly enough, tonight, Mrs. Clinton got asked directly about the emails, about the investigation, about the FBI. How did she handle that?
Well, I think that she handled it in a way that's questionable. Think about last night with the forum on CNN about Goldman Sachs and taking $600,000 in speaking income and how she kind of blew that off and paid the price today with a lot of negative headlines. Tonight, it was a pretty bold statement when pressed on whether or not she might be indicted. Could she say, absolutely, that nothing will come of this FBI investigation of her email? Listen to how she answered it, and you have to wonder how the FBI will react to all this. Watch.
Are you 100% confident that nothing is going to come of this FBI investigation?
I am 100% confident. This is a security review that was requested. It is being carried out. It will be resolved. But I have to add, if there's going to be a security review about me, there's going to have to be security reviews about a lot of other people, including Republican office holders, because we've got this absurd situation of retroactive classifications. Honest to goodness, this just beggars the imagination.
100% certain, she said, that nothing will come of this FBI investigation. You have to wonder, the dozens of FBI agents working on this case right now, what they think about the idea that the potential target of all this believes nothing will come of it. And the final point is, following on last night's CNN forum where she was on defense about Goldman Sachs, tonight she was pressed on, okay, will you release the transcripts of your speeches to Goldman Sachs behind closed doors? Were you saying the same thing in private that you are in public about going after Wall Street? She said she'll think about it. We'll be pressing her on that in the days ahead, you can bet, Shannon.
I'm quite sure you will. Ed Henry, thank you for joining us tonight to wrap it up.
Good to see you.
And we've got a battle-tested panel ready to talk about tonight's highs and lows. Ron Fournier of the National Journal. Columnist Kristen Soltis Anderson of the Washington Examiner, Jonah Goldberg, senior editor of the National Review and a Fox News contributor, and Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Joe Trippi. Good to see all of you tonight.
Good evening.
So, Ronald, I want to start where Ed left off with the emails, because what Mrs. Clinton also went on to say at the end of that exchange was, it's time we get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, it's a really good idea.
Those were her words.
It's a really good idea. The problem with her explanation was it was wrong in at least 3 points, and she probably knows she was wrong, which, of course, is a lie. First, it's not just merely a security review. The FBI is investigating her actions to see whether or not there was criminal activity in the handling of the email. It's not just a review of security. It's to see if there was any criminal wrongdoing. Secondly, she said that no confidential, no top-secret information was transmitted. She didn't even use the spin line that she's used about labeling, which is irrelevant. We know that's factually wrong. And she also said that other secretaries of state have done the same thing, Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. We know that that is wrong, that they did not have all their emails on a private homebrewed server that was outside the government. Right.
On private servers.
Right. There was not a private server, and that's the problem here. And we know that it's, we're talking apples and oranges here. So she's got to know all three of those things are wrong. She's trying to push this down the road and hoping that the FBI doesn't take this into the legal arena. She might be right. We don't know what the FBI is going to do, but what this is doing is undermining her credibility, undermining her trust numbers even more, and that's hurting her not only in the primaries right now, but it's definitely going to hurt her in the general election.
Yeah, and Kristen, that was the question, was how does this affect you in the general if you get there, because there's this drip, drip, drip every day, there's something new. You say it's going to be fine, but how do you convince people to support you when there are concerns among some potential voters that she won't survive the general if she makes it through the primary because of a potential indictment or something else?
The conventional wisdom is that a primary challenge, if it's too tough, can damage you for the general election because it forces you to move too far to the extreme. On the other hand, if a primary challenge is too weak, it doesn't battle test you enough. In this case, on the issue of the emails, Bernie Sanders sort of gave her a pass. He doesn't want to engage her on this issue. And whether it was the foreign policy section of the debate or the section specifically talking about the national security threat posed by her emails, he kind of let her off the hook. So I don't believe that she's ready to answer the questions that will certainly be posed by the Republican nominee and potentially the questions that still have left to be posed by the FBI.
If I could go back, the one big difference with the Republican Secretary of State, they did not violate the White House policy. Mm-hmm. 9 months into her administration, she began to violate the White House policy.
There's some big differences there.
Those Secretaries of State never received any emails from the intelligence community. Mm-hmm. The things that were classified were from within the State Department, which the Secretary of State has the authority to declassify in a way that they can't if it comes from outside.
Neither one of them had personal email servers, which circumvented the whole system. So, I mean, that in itself is a major difference. Connie Rice, former Secretary of State, the emails didn't even go to her. I mean, they went to assistants. They're talking about 10 emails that went to assistants. She didn't even use email.
There's a reason Bernie Sanders isn't pressing her on this, and that's because it's not hurting her with Democrats. Mm-hmm. She has strong, favorable ratings with them, as does he. One. Two, the problem here is that she didn't get a pass. She did the 11 hours in the Benghazi hearings. I mean, on a lot of it on the emails, a lot of it about those things. He's not going to hit her because the women that support her, the African Americans that support her, the groups that support her, he needs to get them to have any chance at the nomination, and he's in this pickle where the more he hits her, the harder he hits her, the more those people, those women are not coming to him. They will dig in. She has the problem with him. She wants those young people that are with him. The harder she hits him, the less likely they're going to ever come to her. So unlike on the Republican side, where you can score points with the Tea Party or score points by the establishment, for instance, if you whack Donald Trump, you don't get that. That kind of dynamic is not happening at all.
This raises just one quick thing. This raises, love Ed Henry. He's a great and powerful guy. He's a great reporter. I completely disagree with him when he said in the beginning the gloves really came off. The gloves stayed on. If you actually listen,
well, maybe one glove was off.
But occasionally, a glove,
one,
but,
like Michael Jackson.
Or Kirsten says that there was the red leather half jacket that really works well on Bernie.
The one glove.
I've been to a lot of Democratic debates. I've been, and did prep for them. This was not a gloves coming off debate.
Yeah. No, but it was more than we've seen.
My point is that it's not just on the emails that Bernie basically gave her a pass. There are so many things you could have said for the first hour. The entire first hour was basically all about Wall Street and campaign finance. And the Clintons have an incredibly sordid record on campaign finance. From people pleading the fifth, foreign money coming from China, Charlie Tree. I mean, you can go down a long list of things that if Bernie Sanders were a true gut-punching politician who was running seriously, could have gone after the Clintons on a whole slew of things and just lets it all go by.
Kristen, I want to ask you real quickly, because Mrs. Clinton talked tonight about a lot of the endorsements that she has from elected officials, and she was specifically talking about Vermont, of course, Senator Sanders' home state, and she listed all the different people that are supporting her, and he used that to turn around to what most of his campaign has been based on, to say, you're right, you are the establishment candidate. To which she then responded, well, I'm the first woman who would ever be the president. As if that somehow counteracts the establishment part of the argument.
I think it's a very bizarre argument, and what I've seen time and again whenever I've done sort of focus groups or research on younger women is they don't necessarily give her credit because she's a female candidate. They sort of assume that they'll see a female president in their lifetime, that to them does not seem like this incredibly special reason to vote for her. They want to know, do they agree with her on the issues? And the way she framed her statement was fascinating. She said, Senator Sanders, you're the only person that would say that I'm part of the establishment. And I thought, let's get the fact checkers on that, because I'm pretty sure that Senator Sanders is not the only person that believes Hillary Clinton is the very symbol of an entrenched political establishment.
So much more to talk about with our panel. So many topics. That is going to be straight ahead on America's election headquarters. And also, we're going to look at the drama and the digs from the Republican side as they prep for their big debate on Saturday night. We'll also be live with party officials, Democratic National Committee Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and the GOP's Sean Spicer. Stick around. Just over 9,300 square miles, but it takes a small army to knock on doors and make all those calls to guarantee some kind of victory on primary day. Senior national correspondent John Roberts now on the men and women who suit up to play the ground game.
I think we're going to win New Hampshire.
He is a faceless voice on the telephone, but it's volunteers like William Payne who helped push Ted Cruz over the top in Iowa, now aiming that aggressive ground game at New Hampshire.
Yeah, I think I may have changed a couple of hearts and minds in my week here, which was the point.
John has run a positive campaign.
Across town, at the headquarters of Ohio Governor John Kasich, Glenita Thompson is trying to win hearts and minds too. One of her main targets? Independent voters.
They are receptive. They are listening to what we have to offer.
The key for Cruz was to identify not only supporters, but supporters who would bring in more people. Sophisticated data mining techniques showed them where to look.
A lot of the people that we contact, our volunteers contact, they often say, I've been waiting for you to call, or what took you so long to get here?
Cruz's ground game helped lift him 5 points for his Iowa win. Donald Trump's lack of one saw him sink by a similar number. Most of the campaigns are looking to Cruz as an example of what to do in New Hampshire. Grant Schaefer is with the Super PAC supporting John Kasich.
He reached out to people, and he actually made sure these people that had expressed support for him made it to vote. And that's going to be a really, really important thing for us over the coming week.
An important thing for Marco Rubio, too. New polls now have him in second place. A good showing here could cement his status as the candidate for the party to rally around. So his volunteers work the phones and walk the neighborhoods. But in the world of New Hampshire politics, not everything works out as you'd hoped it would.
Who do you think about your voting for this year?
Oh, definitely Trump.
Why is that?
Well, I'll tell you, because he's a square shooter. You know, he tells it the way it is, and that's what this country needs now.
A new University of Massachusetts poll found a whopping 41% of voters in New Hampshire say they could change their mind before Tuesday's primary. So whether on the telephone or on their doorstep, those folks are going to have a lot of company in the next 4 days. Shannon?
They sure are, whether they want it or not. Thanks, John. That is it for us here in Washington. I'm Shannon Bream. Let us know if you watched the debate, what you thought about that, or our debate after the debate. You can Twitter me, at Shannon Bream or at Fox News. Thanks always for watching Fox News. See you soon.
Military intelligence experts issued a very concerning statement about Senator Sanders' views on foreign policy and national security. When New Hampshire voters go on Tuesday to cast your vote, you are voting both for a president and a commander-in-chief. And there is no way to predict what comes in the door of that White House from day to day that can pose a threat to the United States.
I fully concede that Secretary Clinton, who was Secretary of State for 4 years, has more experience. That is not arguable in foreign affairs. But experience is not the only point. Judgment is. And once again, back in 2002, when we both looked at the same evidence about the wisdom of the war in Iraq, one of us voted the right way and one of us didn't.
And we're back with our panel, Ron Fournier, Kristen Soltis Anderson, Jonah Goldberg, and Joe Trippi. Joe, I want to start with you. Basically, when we're talking foreign policy with this too, it always boils down to the same thing. She voted for the Iraq War. I would never report it.
Yeah, and I think he kind of looked very shaky during this part of the debate. This was his weakest part of the debate on foreign policy. He always looks uncomfortable. Chuck Todd asked him a specific question about Afghanistan. He had a very nice answer, was almost all about Iraq and Syria, and just dodged Afghanistan completely. I think there's lots of places where he got to Hillary Clinton, but I don't think this foreign policy exchange, I think she bested him there. But I don't really think anything that happened in the debate change is going to happen in New Hampshire. He's likely to win it, probably a sizable win. I don't think she changed that dynamic. I don't think he built on anything there. And I think both of them missed a big opportunity to speak to the states, South Carolina and some of the other states that were coming. Almost no mention of race or any of the things that will matter a lot once you get out of New Hampshire when you're going after a Democratic primary nomination. It was pretty fascinating how focused they were on New Hampshire, but how in the end I don't think either one of them scored some kind of knockout blow that is going to change the dynamic come Tuesday.
They continue this ongoing fight that they're having about who's more progressive and comparing records and going after each other. And there was an interesting point at which they were talking about the relationship with Wall Street and the financial houses and the speeches, at which Jonah, have not seen Mrs. Clinton do this before. It seemed like a new sort of line of defense tonight where she said, I'm getting sick of the innuendos and what you're implying by saying I took paid money for speeches. And it was sort of her, I'm calling on you to stop that. And sort of when she went down that lane, there was some booing in the audience and people thought, maybe they weren't buying it.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of reminded, was it 1992, Bob Kerrey turning to Jerry Brown and saying, are you saying I'm bought and paid for? You know, say it if you're going to say it. And I think Hillary makes a very good point that Sanders does go up to the line of the innuendo of suggesting that she's part of a corrupt system. And my problem with Bernie Sanders is that he could actually prosecute that case pretty well. Because, I mean, Hillary Clinton is the best financed Wall Street-backed candidate in the history of probably either party. And yet he wants to make it always about the system and not about her.
No, but the thing is, it worked. I mean, he pretty much backed.
Yeah, because she said, say what you want to say, you know,
and he does
just come out and say it,
and I think he should have.
He didn't take the direct line.
I think he should have taken the bait.
The debate was really, you know, if you look at it, it was him, the political revolution versus a progressive who gets results. And the problem he's got is, on all these things, taking Wall Street money, those kinds of things, Obama did it. super PAC, Obama did it. And so he's kind of got to, are you saying Obama's not a progressive? Are you saying, when she said that Wellstone under Bernie Sanders' definition wouldn't be, probably one of the most liberal senators ever. He wasn't a progressive because he was for DOMA. So she actually had some pretty effective ways of sort of backing Bernie Sanders off, and it's not his style anyway, so it kind of works. He kind of
guys off the about stage. The system, because the public already knows the system is corrupt. That's baked into the cake. That's why you have Donald Trump running away with it on one end and Bernie Sanders causing problems on the other end. He really had to step into it and make it about her, and there's a lot of reasons to be good at it.
Well, and on this issue of some of the progressive stuff, I noticed in her opening statement tonight, Kristen, she said, I'm not going to make you promises I can't keep. And at one point she launched into, sure, you're going to talk about free stuff for everybody, and they sparred on health care and that issue, but she was really talking about the college issue and the free tuition. But as you said, she needs to get young people. They are turning out in droves for Bernie Sanders. These are people who are dealing with how to pay for college or to deal with the loans. But she kept saying to him tonight, sort of a fairy tale. You can be as progressive as you want, but this stuff has to get paid for.
It was refreshing to me to finally hear somebody on the Democratic side of the aisle acknowledge that one of these big ideas is something that cannot be paid for and is not realistic. But I don't think that the promise of free college is the top or primary reason why young people find Bernie Sanders appealing. I think his sort of aura of authenticity is a lot of what draws them in. I do think it's very problematic that certainly Senator Sanders, but also in many ways Hillary Clinton, support the idea that whenever you have something that's broken, whether it's our K-12 education system, whether it's the way we treat our veterans, these government systems, the public education, the VA, that are broken and don't work well, their prescription always seems to be, let's just fund them more, let's just make them bigger, let's just grow the problem. And I think that's not a message that's going to translate particularly well to your general election.
Their position is, let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of the agency if it's not working.
Well, and last night, I don't know if you remember in the town hall.
Get rid of the agency, but not the requirement to take care of vets, which is what Hillary implied with that shot at the Coke.
She did.
Education, let's get rid of the education department, let's get rid of the EPA, let's get rid of...
On the veterans issue, though, there was last night a veteran who asked about the problems at the VA and said, listen, Senator Sanders, you were heading up the VA committee in the Senate when this was going on, and he admitted, I didn't do a great job with it. But tonight when they came up with the VA issue again, Hillary Clinton did say there's no way I would ever let it be privatized, and she kept saying these guys deserve the very, very best. Obviously, the system's not working as it is. Ron, is that a winning argument for her? Because they both agreed we're never going to privatize it, but it's not working.
Yeah, I think it was a wash because neither one of them came forward with a solution that is going to solve it other than throwing more money at it. I think this is, again, it's another example. The American public knows what's going on. They hear the Republicans saying they're going to fix it, and they hear the Democrats saying they're going to fix it, and they see that it's not fixed. They know the system is corrupt, and they know all the politicians are corrupt, and that's why they are just looking for disruption in the worst possible way. And you know what? They're getting it in the worst possible way with Donald Trump and with Bernie Sanders.
That wasn't a message primarily to vets. That was a message to government sector, public sector unions.
We're not getting rid of you.
Don't worry, we're not going to do anything like privatization, right? And that's that matters in a democratic.
I want to get back to Hillary Clinton on the Wall Street stuff. There was a moment there where she was really exposed when Chuck Todd called her on her bluff after she said, "Yeah, when I gave those paid speeches and got all that money, when I got in there, I gave him hell."
Influence, right?
And then he circles back a little bit. And he says, "So that's great. That's pretty cool. Let us see the transcripts." And she went, that was a place Bernie Sanders should have jumped in and said, "Yep, you talking out of both sides of your mouth. Let us see the transcripts. If you really gave them hell, let us see the transcripts." And if I'm him, I'm up in the air tomorrow with that advertisement.
Right. I think you're right about the Todd moment there. But the thing that people I think people are missing is, look, she's been the focus. Everything has been her emails, her with Wall Street, whatever. Right. I was with Howard Dean. We ducked. No one was watching us. We had a cute, cuddly thing until it started. We went to the front. Well, guess what? Bernie Sanders is now, tied or lost slightly in Iowa, and so the VA thing that happened yesterday. He was on that committee. Nothing happened during that time. So these questions now are he's now going to become part of the focus, not just her, and that didn't happen in the debate tonight, but it's going to happen.
It did happen one point. The analog to what happened with Hillary Clinton was when Chuck Todd asked him, "So you're for campaign finance reform, right? How about you stay within the presidential system?" And he went,
Yeah, exactly.
And Hillary should have jumped right into that breach.
But he's not going to be the cute, cuddly thing that gets away with it anymore. That's what I'm saying. saying. It's going to now come.
I have to ask quickly about this because just one of my personal pet projects, the Supreme Court. We're looking at several justices getting into their 80s. Whomever is the next president is probably going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 appointments. How do you think that shakes out in this race, if at all? Because we heard Bernie Sanders talking about sort of his litmus test is like, you got to get rid of Citizens United, the ruling about political speech and money as speech.
Well, even that was unrealistic. I mean, that's nuts. Yeah, I mean, there is no judge out there who's going to proclaim publicly that they would overturn that ruling because you don't.
Then you'd have to recuse.
You can't do that. You have to recuse yourself. So there is a certain. That's part of the thing that's going on here. There's certain non-reality to what he's talking about that I think Clinton tries to point out, but I don't. But just the same kind of pulling the punch doesn't go in on that one. That was a place she could have gone and look. We've got a Republican House, we've got a Republican Senate, and the Supreme Court is going to be hanging in the balance. And this is the kind of the kind of way you would pick a judge. That is, and gone for him because of what's all at stake. I mean, from the left, women's rights. I mean, a lot of things.
Galvanize both.
Yeah. And she didn't go. And she didn't go. Just like Ron said, he didn't go in.
One justice changes everything. 3 or 4 that reshapes history in a big way.
They all had their Michael Jackson glove on, I understand.
Just one. We don't have it. It's sparkly. It would be nice if we had it, but we don't. All right. Thank you very much, panel. Still ahead, we're going to go back to the spin room. We're going to talk with the DNC's top spinner, Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Jeb Bush gets some serious TLC on the trail from none other than former First Lady and First Mom, Barbara Bush. Campaign Carl Cameron joins us from the trail. He is in Manchester. Hey, Carl.
The Silver Fox returns to the First of the Nation primary state, Shannon. We are 5 days from that election, and the candidates are busily elbowing and positioning as we get ready to count them down. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
It's getting nasty in New Hampshire. We're not talking about the weather. The primary election is on Tuesday, but there's also a Republican debate coming up Saturday night. So it is no wonder that the candidates are trying to build everything they can do to build momentum. Campaign Carl Cameron is in Manchester tonight. Hey, Carl.
Hi, Shannon. And now that the Democrats' debate is over, their final one before the New Hampshire primary, we can look forward to the one with the Republicans coming Saturday night. And there will be no undercard. ABC decided last week that that would not happen. And insofar as Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum have dropped out of the race, the only 2 that would have been left had there been one, were Carly Fiorina and Jim Gilmore. Fiorina actually collected tens of thousands of petitions to ABC to try to get herself onto the stage, but it does not appear that that's going to happen. That's Saturday night. In the meantime, Trump has returned to the campaign trail here in New Hampshire and once again gone after Ted Cruz as Canadian and eligible for president, etc. And tonight on the campaign trail in Laconia, Cruz was having a town hall meeting, and one of the voters in the audience stood up and asked him about his Canadian heritage. Watch this.
Could you please explain to me why and how, until recently, you were unaware that you were a Canadian citizen from birth?
Look, the facts are real simple. My mom is a U.S. citizen by birth. She was born in Wilmington, Delaware.
Well, I'm actually not...
Sir, I'll answer your question, but I'm not going to debate you.
No, but you're not...
I'll answer your question, but I'm not going to debate you.
Shut up.
Now, under U.S. law, the child of a U.S. citizen born abroad is a natural-born citizen.
Those are the types of questions and impromptu moments that candidates have been tested by for decades in New Hampshire, and the kind of thing that both Cruz and Christie and others have said Marco Rubio has effectively escaped. Trump today basically ignored Cruz and Rubio, and at his event tonight, he went back to what's been a staple of his campaign from the very beginning, and that's bashing Jeb Bush. Watch.
He spent $100 million, and he's nowhere. He's like at the bottom of the pack. And the only reason I even bring him up is he does so many commercials of me. They're so negative. But they can't be that negative because every time they go in, my poll numbers go up. It's crazy.
Jeb Bush was on the campaign trail today with his mother, Barbara Bush, the former First Lady, along. As we referred to her earlier, sometimes called the Silver Fox. Sometimes in the family she's been called the Enforcer. And at her side today, her son, Jeb Bush, trying to get some traction and certainly willing to take all the star power she can bring, talked about how proud he is of his family.
Figured this all out. I'm part of the establishment because I'm Barbara Bush's son. I embrace that each and every day. That doesn't bother me a bit.
And the pro-Bush super PAC, Right to Rise, has put together an ad that now includes George W. Bush. It hasn't aired yet. It hasn't been purchased, but it's out in the media, signaling that the former president's coming out on the campaign trail for Jeb as well, if not in person, at least on the airwaves, Shannon.
All right, and Carl, what's all the buzz about Marco Rubio?
Lots of buzz. There are a couple of polls that suggested that he'd moved into second place, albeit within the margin of error with the rest of the pack, and still far behind Donald Trump. But Rubio has become the center of attention and the center of attacks. Cruz has been going after him. Christie calls him a bubble boy. Cruz has actually adopted that attack too. Jeb Bush and Ted Cruz and others all seem to be almost synchronized in terms of a chorus of attacks on Rubio. And for his part, he fights back, and today I asked him specifically what his answer was to the question that he's been hiding from questions, and he sort of said, well, I take all of yours, Carl. And the truth is, in the last couple of weeks, he has been making himself available, but not anything like the rest of the field had been in the weeks and months prior to that. And so what he's trying to do is talk up his own positives and not get involved in the taking down of others' negatives. Here's a little bit of Marco promoting his own candidacy.
I may not have lived as long as some of the people running, but in the time that I've been involved in these issues, I have more experience and shown better judgment than any of them has.
Tough stuff. They're all going at it, and it's just a couple of days to the last debate before the New Hampshire primary, and this weekend will really it gets crazy. All of the crowds become overflow, spilling out into the streets. It's hard to get parking spaces, and the candidates are throwing everything they can at one another, Shannon.
All right, well, as we talked about with the panel, when you start to surge to the front, you have a whole lot more of a target on your back. So we'll see. They've all got to wind through that and get ready for that primary. Carl, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, let's head back to Durham, New Hampshire, where Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Democratic National Committee Chair, joins us live from the debate spin room. Chairwoman, good to see you again tonight.
You too, Shannon. Thank you.
All right, there's been this ongoing conversation, debate back and forth between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton about who is farthest left, who is most progressive. How do you think that's going to work in the general?
Well, I think the entire debate was really incredibly substantive, and so in talking about the characterization of each of their progressivism, I think it helps highlight for voters that our candidates are talking about continuing to move our country forward, build on the progress we've made. We pulled, thanks to Barack Obama, our country out of the worst economic crisis where we were losing 800,000 jobs, and compared to the Republican field, which you just recounted, are hurling insults at one another, even when they're not on the debate stage, that the contrast is pretty clear. And so I thought our debate gave voters another opportunity to see why a Democrat should be elected the 45th president.
Well, as for the GOP, of course, that's the way that primary campaigns work. And some would say there hasn't been enough of a primary campaign on your side, that Hillary Clinton has essentially been coronated, that the Sanders campaign hasn't been included in decisions about debates, those kinds of things. How do you respond to those accusations that it's all been set up to make sure that she is your winner?
Well, you know, as the chair of the DNC, it's my job to neutrally manage the primary nominating contest, which I have endeavored to do. You know, we just added 4 additional debates, including this debate this evening that the DNC sanctioned. We worked with our candidates very specifically over the course of the last week to hammer out the details of those. And frankly, if you look at this, campaign, it's pretty darn competitive. So I would certainly beg to differ with anyone that suggests that we've attempted to do anything other than make sure we can prepare for whoever our nominee is, to make sure we can help launch them to the presidency.
Senator Sanders said something interesting tonight. He said if he's elected president, he wants to bring about, quote, major changes in the Democratic Party. He has run many times not as a Democrat, but as an independent. He's described himself as a socialist. What do you make of his claim that he wants to make major changes to your party?
Well, I think the senator is talking, and I've talked with him about this, the continued importance of our making sure that we can build our party from the grassroots up. We've focused very specifically in the last year on strengthening our state parties. We have a 50-state strategy, which I'd be happy to continue to educate him about, and make sure that we can have every one of our parties, our state parties in America, be able to have the strength that they need to be able to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. And so anytime a candidate of ours indicates that they want to help strengthen the party, we welcome it.
Okay, the Des Moines Register has said it is time for an audit of the way that Democrats did things in the caucuses. A lot of questions about coin tosses, deciding multiple precincts, those kinds of things. They're asking for more transparency. I know it's a state party issue, but would you support some more answers, providing written materials that the Sanders campaign would like to see, records and more transparency there, and basically an audit of the way that they did things?
I have confidence in the Iowa Democratic Party and the process that they ran. Chairman Andy McGuire really and her team did an excellent job. Remember, there are over 1,800 precincts in Iowa, and the state party effectively ran a caucus that is very complex at the same time in every one of those 1,800 plus precincts. That's a challenging job. This was the closest race that we've had in their caucus's history, and I'm confident that the outcome and the process was one that was effective and is without question.
All right. Well, we thank you, Chairwoman, for giving us some time tonight following the debate, and we'll see you soon out there on the trail.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, coming up. The polls say he is the man to beat in New Hampshire, but Donald Trump isn't taking any chances. Will his ground game this time around stop the competition? And with the primary just days away, we'll check in with GOP Communication Director Sean Spicer. It might be hard to remember sometimes the reason for the campaign season. It's not just to raise money to beat up on your opponent. It's actually we're doing this to elect a president. Our next guest hopes a Republican wins the ultimate prize, but which one? He's probably not going to tell us. GOP Communications Director Sean Spicer is in the spin room. Sean, your reaction tonight. You heard me ask Chairwoman Wasserman Schultz there about this poll to the left with these two candidates. How do you think that's going to work in the general when they stack up against whomever you end up with?
Yeah, I think tonight was really bad night for Hillary Clinton. This idea that she won't disclose these Wall Street fees is definitely going to be something that comes back in the general election for her. I think Bernie Sanders was really able to contrast where he stands on the issues with her going to this crucial primary in New Hampshire after not doing well in Iowa. She's down double digits here, and I think this is going to be a big problem because she continues to have to go further and further to the left just to kind of not get clobbered by Bernie Sanders with the base of the Democratic Party.
All right, so how do you respond to the chairwoman's assertion that either one of these two candidates will be so much better than whomever you pick because the Republicans are all about turning back the clock when it comes to women's rights, racism, wages, income inequality? You know the list.
Right, I know the list, and it hasn't worked out well for him. I think you look at the difference between the two debate stages that exist right now. On our stage, you see a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot of diversity, a high level of qualifications, and a vision for America. What you see on the Democratic side is old, stale, same old left-wing policies. I mean, let's think about it. You have Hillary Clinton losing right now to a 74-year-old gadfly socialist from Vermont who's been in Congress 24 years. This is not what they thought there would be. And when you look at the parties, 6 precincts in Iowa were decided by a coin toss the other night. So when we came to the debate, we brought a double-sided Hillary Clinton coin to make sure that in case tonight's debate was a tie, that we could help solve that, who the winner was.
We didn't know there were going to be props. I should have offered the chairwoman a chance to have her props as well. But she referenced the infighting that you guys are having right now. I mean, that is what primaries are about, is culling out the field, talking about the differences. And, of course, at times you do have to go after the records of the people that you're running against. Do you worry about this large field and the amount of time they're spending beating up on each other before you get to an eventual GOP nominee?
Well, look, Shannon, I think when you look at the level of intensity and interest that's going on in each party right now, it's clearly the Republican Party that has the excitement and the enthusiasm and intensity. We're bringing in the viewership and the interest because of the uniqueness, quality, and diversity that our stage has. On their side, it's literally a question of who's going further to the left. And I know that ratings don't equal votes, but there's a reason that no one's tuning into these debates on the Democratic side, and part of it is because because there's not a level of excitement that they've seen 7 years of a Democratic administration, and they're going to get 4 more of the same if we elect the Democrats. We've $19 trillion in debt, a foreign policy that's in shambles, and I think what Americans want right now is a lot of ideas where we can take this country, both economically, domestically, and foreign policy-wise, because there's a lot of threats that you face as a country right now. And what you heard tonight on the Democratic side was not reassuring if you're a voter that's looking for solutions for this country.
Sean, you talk about diversity on the GOP side of the ticket. In the next debate, Carly Fiorina, obviously the only female running on the GOP side, is not going to be on the stage unless something changes. I know that she's appealed to the RNC. I know that petitions have been filed. Any chance you think that changes?
Well, criteria is set by the networks. In this case, it was issued several weeks ago. It's the most inclusive criteria so far that's been set to ensure that any candidate that was viable could make it on the debate stage. I think you've seen this party do everything we can to make sure that everyone had a voice since Cleveland of last year, when we set up a system that would have 2 stages and 17 candidates. It's our party that's allowed more voices than ever before on debate stages. It's my hope that if she continues to do well, that she'll be on the next one. But that's this process. Governor Christie at one point didn't make the criteria. He went out, worked hard, got back on. Senator Paul did the same thing. And hopefully, Ms. Fiorina can go out and make the next one. But the process allows for that kind of momentum to come back into the process and be back on the debate stage if you meet that minimum threshold.
All right. Sean Spicer with the RNC. Good to see you tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, it's a small state, but it can pack a knockout punch for those who want to be president. Still ahead, the power of persuasion and a winning ground game. Campaign workers may be the difference between success and failure.